humans have an incredible talent for turning inconvenience into tragedy. Fact 1. A young man in Australia noticed a small problem while fishing from a rocky shoreline. His fishing line had become tangled around a section of rock just below the water. It was the kind of annoyance that happens thousands of times every day. Most people would cut the line, lose a few dollars of gear, and head home mildly irritated. Instead, he climbed down slippery rocks to retrieve it. Witnesses later said the sea appeared calm, but coastal waters are experts at pretending to be harmless. A sudden wave struck the rocks, knocked him off balance, and pulled him into rough water. Rescue crews responded quickly, but the current was stronger than anyone realized. What began as an attempt to save a fishing line ended with a recovery operation. It's a brutal reminder that nature doesn't care how small the original problem was. Sometimes a few dollars of equipment becomes the most expensive decision a person ever makes. Fact 2. In the United States, a homeowner discovered that a section of his roof gutter was clogged with leaves after a storm. It wasn't an emergency. Water wasn't pouring into the house. Nothing was collapsing. The problem could have waited until the next day or until proper equipment arrived. Instead, he decided to handle it immediately. Rather than using a secured ladder and safety gear, he improvised. Family members later said he believed the job would take only a minute. While reaching awkwardly to clear debris, he lost his balance and fell from the roof. The height wasn't extraordinary, which is exactly what makes stories like this so dangerous. People often associate fatal falls with skyscrapers or construction sites. In reality, a relatively short fall can be enough if the landing is wrong. What started as a clogged gutter, a household annoyance millions of Americans face every autumn, became a tragedy that changed an entire family's life forever. Fact 3. A man in Florida was driving home when he noticed something rattling underneath his vehicle. Most drivers have experienced that moment of irritation. Maybe it's a loose piece of plastic. Maybe a branch got stuck under the frame. He pulled over to investigate, assuming the issue would take seconds to fix. According to reports, he crawled partially beneath the vehicle without properly securing it. The car had seemed stable enough. Unfortunately, seemed stable and actually stable are two very different things. At some point, the vehicle shifted unexpectedly. What had been a minor mechanical nuisance instantly became a life-threatening emergency. Bystanders rushed to help, and emergency responders arrived quickly, but the outcome was devastating. The original problem wasn't an engine failure, a major accident, or anything dramatic. It was simply an annoying noise. Yet countless fatal incidents begin exactly that way, with a person trying to solve a tiny inconvenience immediately rather than treating a potentially dangerous situation with caution. Fact 4. A man in California noticed a swarm of bees gathering near his property. At first, it seemed like nothing more than an annoying nuisance. The insects had settled around an old tree, and neighbors suggested calling a professional beekeeper. Unfortunately, patience wasn't part of his plan. Believing he could solve the issue himself, he grabbed a can of gasoline and attempted to destroy the hive. It was a decision that combined poor judgment with a complete misunderstanding of how flammable liquids behave. Witnesses later reported that fumes ignited almost instantly. What started as a simple effort to remove a few thousand unwanted insects became a rapidly spreading fire. Emergency crews arrived, but the situation escalated far beyond what anyone expected when the morning began. The bees weren't the real danger that day. The attempt to eliminate them turned a manageable problem into a catastrophe with consequences no one could reverse. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. We're curious to see how far our videos travel around the world. Fact 5. A farmer in the American Midwest discovered that one of his cows had become trapped in a muddy section of land after heavy rain. Situations like this happen on farms every year, and experienced farmers usually bring equipment, additional workers, or specialized machinery to handle the rescue safely. But urgency has a way of convincing people that shortcuts are acceptable. Determined to free the animal quickly, he entered the unstable mud himself. At first, progress seemed possible. The cow moved slightly and the rescue appeared to be working. Then the ground beneath him began acting more like quicksand than soil. Every movement made escape more difficult. Neighbors eventually noticed something was wrong and called for help, but valuable time had passed. The original problem involved a trapped animal worth money. The outcome was a tragedy that left an entire community talking about how quickly a routine farm problem became something far more devastating. Fact 6. In Florida, a homeowner noticed that a large tree branch was hanging dangerously over his driveway after a storm. The branch looked unstable, but it hadn't fallen yet. Friends advised hiring a professional tree service, especially because the limb was positioned high above the ground and partially tangled with other branches. Wanting to save both time and money, he decided to remove it himself. Armed with a ladder and a chainsaw, he climbed into a situation that professionals spend years learning to manage safely. The problem with damaged trees is that they rarely move the way people expect. As he cut through the branch, hidden tension inside the wood suddenly released. Witnesses described the movement as instantaneous. Within seconds, the branch swung unpredictably. What had started as an attempt to protect a driveway from possible damage became a fatal accident. The tree eventually came down, but at a cost nobody could have imagined that morning. Fact 7. A man vacationing near the coast noticed his expensive sunglasses had slipped into shallow water beside a rocky pier. The loss was frustrating but hardly life-changing. The water appeared calm, and the glasses remained visible beneath the surface. Determined not to lose them, he climbed down the rocks for a closer look. People watching nearby later said it seemed completely reasonable at first. The sunglasses were right there. The problem was that coastal environments can change in seconds. While focusing on the item below him, he paid less attention to the ocean around him. A larger wave arrived unexpectedly and struck the rocks with far more force than previous waves. The impact knocked him off balance and into dangerous water. Rescue teams responded rapidly, but conditions complicated the operation. The sunglasses were eventually recovered. The man who wanted to save them never returned home from what had started as a normal vacation afternoon. Fact 8. One of the most chilling examples involved a homeowner who heard unusual scratching noises inside the walls of his house. The sounds were irritating but not alarming. He suspected a small animal had found its way into the structure and decided to investigate personally rather than wait for pest control. After locating the area where the noises seemed loudest, he entered a cramped attic space carrying only basic tools and a flashlight. The task appeared simple: find the source of the noise and solve the problem. What he didn't realize was that portions of the attic floor were never designed to support a person's weight. While moving toward the sound, he stepped onto a weak section hidden beneath insulation. The surface gave way instantly. What began as an effort to deal with a minor household annoyance ended in a catastrophic fall. Ironically, investigators later discovered the mysterious scratching was caused by a small animal that posed virtually no threat at all. Fact 9. A retired man living near a lake noticed that his small fishing boat had drifted away from the dock during a windy afternoon. The vessel wasn't sinking, damaged, or disappearing into the horizon. In fact, it remained visible only a short distance offshore. Neighbors suggested waiting for calmer conditions or calling someone with another boat to help retrieve it. Instead, he chose the fastest solution available. Believing the distance was manageable, he entered the water fully clothed and began swimming toward it. What he underestimated was how quickly cold water drains energy from the human body, especially in older adults. Witnesses later recalled that he initially appeared confident and made steady progress. Then his movement slowed. The boat remained frustratingly close, yet impossibly far away. Rescue crews launched almost immediately after someone noticed trouble, but the situation deteriorated rapidly. A drifting boat was an inconvenience. Trying to save it transformed a routine afternoon into a heartbreaking tragedy. Fact 10. A homeowner in the Pacific Northwest discovered a raccoon repeatedly entering his garage through a damaged section near the roofline. The animal was annoying, but it wasn't attacking anyone or causing major destruction. Most people would have contacted wildlife professionals. Instead, determined to solve the problem immediately, he climbed onto the roof carrying tools and materials to seal the opening himself. The repair seemed simple enough. Locate the gap, close it, and prevent the raccoon from returning. Unfortunately, the area had recently been exposed to rain, leaving portions of the roof slick and unstable. While positioning himself near the edge, he lost traction. What makes stories like this particularly tragic is how ordinary they are. There was no storm, no dramatic emergency, and no race against time. Just a homeowner dealing with a persistent pest. The raccoon survived the entire incident. The person trying to keep it out of the garage never had the chance to finish the repair. Fact 11. A man hiking in a remote desert region dropped his car keys into a narrow rock crevice while taking photographs. It was a frustrating mistake, especially because the nearest town was miles away. Still, losing keys is a solvable problem. Roadside assistance exists. Spare keys exist. Even long walks eventually end. Unfortunately, patience often loses battles against determination. Refusing to abandon the keys, he began climbing down into the confined space where they had fallen. The opening appeared accessible from above, but the deeper sections narrowed dramatically. Search teams later concluded that he became trapped while attempting to reach the keys. What began as a simple retrieval effort quickly evolved into a survival situation in extreme heat. By the time help arrived, conditions had become critical. The saddest detail is that replacement keys could have been made within days. The original set remained at the bottom of the crevice, beside the place where a minor inconvenience became a fatal decision. Fact 12. After a powerful storm moved through a rural community, one resident noticed a section of fencing had collapsed near his property. The damage wasn't severe. The fence could have been repaired later, and there was no immediate threat to people or livestock. However, while inspecting the area, he discovered a power line lying nearby. Believing the line was inactive because there were no visible sparks or flames, he decided to move it himself so he could begin repairs. Utility workers repeatedly warned that downed power lines should always be treated as energized, regardless of appearance. Unfortunately, assumptions can be deadly. Witnesses later said he seemed completely unaware of the danger. The fence had become the focus of his attention, while the electrical hazard blended into the background. Emergency responders arrived quickly after neighbors called for help, but the outcome was devastating. The fence was eventually repaired. The person trying to fix it never returned home. Fact 13. One of the most astonishing cases involved a man who noticed smoke coming from the engine compartment of his vehicle while driving. At first, the issue appeared minor. The smoke was light and the vehicle was still operating normally. He pulled over and opened the hood to investigate. What he saw was likely a small fire beginning somewhere inside the engine bay. Many people would have stepped back and called emergency services. Instead, worried about losing the vehicle, he attempted to extinguish the flames himself. Witnesses later reported that he focused entirely on saving the car. What he didn't realize was that fuel and heat can create rapidly changing conditions beneath a hood. Within moments, the situation escalated far beyond a manageable fire. Emergency crews responded, but events unfolded with shocking speed. It all began with a little smoke, something countless drivers have encountered. By the end of the day, a mechanical problem had become a tragedy remembered by everyone who witnessed it. Fact 14. A homeowner in Texas woke up to discover a small section of his backyard fence had been damaged during the night. The culprit appeared obvious. A large branch from a neighboring tree had fallen across the property line and crushed part of the structure. It was annoying, expensive, and inconvenient, but hardly an emergency. Rather than waiting for help, he decided to remove the branch himself before work. The limb looked stable from the ground, but appearances can be dangerously misleading after a tree has fallen. Large branches often store tremendous tension, like a giant spring waiting to release. As he began cutting through the wood, the pressure shifted unexpectedly. Witnesses later described the movement as instantaneous. One moment, everything appeared under control. The next, the branch snapped violently in a direction nobody anticipated. What started as a damaged fence and a desire to save a few hours became a tragedy that stunned everyone in the neighborhood. Fact 15. A man visiting a national park noticed his cell phone slipping from his pocket while standing near a scenic overlook. The device landed on a narrow ledge several feet below the viewing area. It wasn't lost forever. Park staff routinely assist with situations like that, and Phones can always be replaced. Unfortunately, expensive electronics have a strange ability to convince people they are irreplaceable. Determined to recover it immediately, he climbed beyond a safety barrier designed specifically to prevent accidents. Tourists nearby watched nervously as he moved closer to the ledge. The phone remained visible the entire time, almost teasing him with how close it seemed. Then a single misstep changed everything. Rescue personnel later noted that countless fatal incidents begin exactly this way. The original problem is rarely life-threatening. It's the decision to solve it personally that creates the danger. In the end, the phone survived the fall. The person reaching for it did not. Fact 16. A rural homeowner noticed that water had stopped flowing properly through a drainage pipe running beneath part of his property. The blockage was causing minor flooding after rainstorms, and he suspected leaves or debris had become lodged inside. It was the kind of maintenance issue that frustrates property owners every year. Rather than bringing in specialized equipment, he decided to investigate personally. Believing the obstruction couldn't be far away, he entered a confined section of the drainage system. At first, everything seemed manageable. Then conditions changed. Rescue investigators later determined that limited airflow inside the enclosed space created an extremely dangerous environment. What makes incidents like this especially tragic is that the threat is often invisible. There are no warning lights, loud noises, or obvious signs of danger. The pipe simply looked like a narrow tunnel with a clog. What began as an attempt to restore proper drainage ended with emergency crews responding to a situation no one expected that morning. Fact 17. One of the most remarkable cases involved a man whose dog wandered onto a frozen pond during winter. The animal appeared frightened but unharmed, standing only a short distance from shore. Neighbors urged caution and suggested contacting emergency services trained for ice rescues. But anyone who has ever owned a beloved pet understands how quickly emotion can override judgment. Without hesitation, he stepped onto the frozen surface and began moving toward the dog. Initially, everything seemed fine. The ice held his weight and the animal remained within sight. Then came the sound every winter rescuer fears, a sharp crack echoing across the pond. What happened next unfolded within seconds. Emergency responders later emphasized that ice conditions can vary dramatically across just a few feet. Areas that appear solid may conceal dangerous weaknesses underneath. The dog eventually made it safely back to shore. Tragically, the person trying to save it never returned home. Fact 18. A homeowner in Arizona heard unusual noises coming from inside an abandoned well located on the edge of his property. Curious and concerned, he suspected a small animal had become trapped. The situation seemed simple enough. Take a look, identify the problem, and perhaps help whatever was making the noise. Friends later recalled that he viewed the entire situation as a minor inconvenience, delaying his weekend plans. Armed with a flashlight, he approached the well and attempted to inspect the interior more closely. Old wells can be deceptively dangerous places. Their structures often weaken over decades, even when they appear stable from above. While leaning forward for a better view, the ground near the opening suddenly gave way. Investigators later discovered that erosion had compromised the area surrounding the well for years. The trapped animal was eventually located and rescued. The person trying to help it became the true victim of the incident. Fact 19. A man living near a wooded area noticed that a section of his property was becoming overrun by a large hornet's nest attached to an old tree. The insects were aggressive, but the situation wasn't urgent. Pest control companies handle nests like this every day. Unfortunately, waiting a few hours felt unnecessary to him. Convinced he could solve the problem himself, he waited until evening and approached the nest carrying a flashlight and a can of insect spray. At first, everything seemed under control. Then the beam of light shifted, the spray missed its target, and thousands of disturbed hornets erupted from the tree. Witnesses later said he immediately tried to run, but panic and uneven ground are a dangerous combination. Emergency responders arrived quickly, yet the incident had already spiraled far beyond a simple pest problem. What began as an attempt to avoid paying for professional help became a tragic reminder that nature rarely rewards overconfidence. Fact 20. A homeowner in Colorado woke up to find a section of his chimney blocked by what sounded like a trapped bird. The noises echoed through the house all morning, becoming increasingly irritating. Family members suggested calling a chimney specialist, but he believed the solution would take only a few minutes. Armed with a ladder, flashlight, and basic tools, he climbed onto the roof to investigate. The bird was never actually visible, but the sounds convinced him it couldn't be far away. While leaning over the chimney opening, he attempted to look deeper inside. Investigators later determined that a combination of loose roofing material and an awkward position contributed to what happened next. Neighbors were stunned because there had been no emergency, no severe weather, and no pressure to act immediately. The entire incident began with a strange noise in a chimney. The bird eventually escaped on its own. The homeowner never came back down from the roof. Fact 21. A fisherman along the Gulf Coast noticed that his boat's anchor had become stuck on the seafloor. It was a frustrating but common problem. Anchors snag on rocks, debris, and underwater structures all the time. Most experienced boaters either cut the line or use specialized techniques to free them safely. Determined not to lose expensive equipment, he chose another option. Witnesses reported that he entered the water, intending to manually release the anchor himself. At first, the task seemed straightforward. The water was calm, visibility was decent, and the boat remained nearby. What he didn't anticipate was how quickly underwater conditions can change. Strong currents often exist below the surface, even when everything appears peaceful above it. Fellow boaters later described the entire event as shockingly fast. A piece of metal designed to hold a boat in place became the center of a rescue operation. The anchor was eventually recovered. Its owner was not. Fact 22. A rural property owner discovered that a large section of fencing had collapsed after a herd of deer pushed through during the night. The damage wasn't severe enough to require immediate repairs, but he worried livestock might wander through the opening. Wanting to secure the area before sunset, he began replacing fence posts himself. During the process, he encountered an old post buried deep in hardened soil. Rather than using proper equipment, he decided to remove it manually with the help of a tractor and a chain. Farmers perform similar tasks every day, but tension stored in chains and cables can create enormous danger. As pressure increased, something suddenly failed. Witnesses later described hearing a loud crack, followed by complete silence. The original problem involved a damaged fence and a stubborn post. Neither seemed particularly threatening. Yet those simple obstacles ultimately triggered a sequence of events that transformed a routine repair job into a devastating tragedy. Fact 23. One of the most unbelievable cases began with a lost wedding ring. A man noticed the ring slipping from his finger while standing near a storm drain after heavy rain. He actually saw it disappear through the metal grate below. The loss was heartbreaking. The ring carried decades of memories and enormous sentimental value. Still, it remained only a piece of jewelry. Refusing to abandon it, he began searching for a way into the drainage system. According to reports, he eventually attempted to access the area himself, rather than wait for municipal workers. What many people fail to realize is that storm drains are extremely hazardous environments. Water levels can rise unexpectedly, surfaces become dangerously slippery, and confined spaces create risks invisible from above. Search teams later recovered the ring during their investigation. Tragically, the object that symbolized a lifetime of commitment became the reason its owner never made it home. Fact 24. A homeowner noticed smoke emerging from a small storage shed behind his house late one evening. At first glance, the situation seemed manageable. The smoke appeared light, and there were no visible flames spreading to nearby structures. Neighbors immediately urged him to call firefighters and stay clear of the building. Instead, worried about valuable tools stored inside, he rushed toward the shed to save what he could. Witnesses later recalled seeing him carry several items out successfully, which likely reinforced the belief that the situation remained under control. But fires are unpredictable, especially inside enclosed spaces filled with fuel, chemicals, and equipment. Conditions can shift from manageable to catastrophic in seconds. Emergency crews arrived shortly after receiving calls from nearby residents, yet events unfolded with frightening speed. The original problem was a small fire in an outbuilding. The decision to protect possessions turned that minor emergency into a tragedy that shocked the entire community. Fact 25. A homeowner in Oregon noticed that a basketball had landed on top of a large backyard tree after a neighborhood game. It wasn't an expensive ball, nor was anyone particularly upset about losing it. Most people would have shrugged, bought another one, and forgotten about it by dinner. Instead, the homeowner decided the ball had to come down immediately. He first tried throwing objects at it, then attempted to shake the branches. When neither worked, he brought out a ladder and began climbing higher into the tree. Witnesses later said the ball appeared almost comically unimportant compared to the effort being spent retrieving it. The higher he climbed, the narrower and weaker the branches became. What started as a simple annoyance slowly transformed into a dangerous situation. By the time emergency services were called, a forgotten backyard game had evolved into a tragedy. The basketball eventually fell from the tree. Unfortunately, the homeowner did not. Fact 26. A fisherman on a remote river noticed his tackle box slipping from the edge of a small dock and falling into the water below. The box contained expensive gear collected over many years, making the loss particularly frustrating. Still, equipment can be replaced. Memories and experience cannot. Determined to recover it, he used a long pole to locate the box beneath the surface. When that failed, he decided to enter the water himself. Witnesses recalled that the river appeared calm and shallow near the dock, creating a false sense of security. What many people failed to see was the strong current flowing just below the surface. Rivers often hide their power beneath a peaceful appearance. Within moments, the situation changed dramatically. Rescue crews responded after nearby boaters noticed trouble, but the outcome was heartbreaking. The tackle box was eventually recovered downstream. The man who entered the water to save it never returned to shore. Fact 27. A property owner in the Southwest discovered that a section of his old water well had become blocked. The issue wasn't affecting the household water supply, but he worried the obstruction might eventually create larger problems. Rather than contacting specialists, he decided to inspect the well himself. Armed with ropes and basic equipment, he began lowering himself into the structure. At first, everything appeared manageable. The descent was slow and communication with people above remained normal. Then conditions changed unexpectedly. Investigators later explained that older wells can contain dangerous atmospheres with reduced oxygen levels or harmful gases. The threat is often completely invisible. There are no warning signs, strange colors, or dramatic noises announcing danger. What began as an effort to solve a maintenance issue became an emergency operation. Neighbors watched in disbelief as rescue teams arrived. The blocked well remained exactly where it had always been. The homeowner never emerged from it. Fact 28. One of the most astonishing incidents involved a driver who noticed a small amount of smoke rising from beneath the dashboard of his aging pickup truck. The vehicle was still running, and the smoke seemed minor at first. Most people would have parked safely and waited for professional assistance. Instead, concerned about being stranded, he continued investigating the issue himself. After pulling over, he began working around electrical components inside the vehicle, hoping to locate the source of the problem. Witnesses later reported seeing him repeatedly return to the truck, despite clear signs that conditions were worsening. Electrical fires are particularly dangerous because they can spread inside hidden sections of a vehicle long before visible flames appear. What started as a faint wisp of smoke quickly escalated into something far more serious. The truck could have been replaced. The original issue was little more than a warning sign. Ignoring that warning changed everything. Fact 29. A man visiting a coastal area spotted something shiny lodged between rocks near the base of a sea cliff. According to family members, he believed it might be an expensive watch or piece of jewelry washed ashore by the tide. The object remained visible from above, sparkling occasionally in the sunlight. Curiosity turned into determination, and determination soon became obsession. Despite warnings from others nearby, he began climbing down toward the rocks to retrieve it. The descent looked manageable from a distance, but coastal cliffs often conceal loose surfaces weakened by years of erosion. As he moved closer to the object, conditions became increasingly dangerous. Witnesses later described the scene as surreal because the item itself turned out to have little value. Investigators determined it was merely a reflective piece of metal debris. The tragedy wasn't caused by a storm, a disaster, or an emergency. It began with curiosity and ended because of something that wasn't even treasure. Fact 30. A homeowner in Louisiana noticed that a large alligator had wandered into a drainage ditch near his property after heavy rainfall. The animal wasn't threatening anyone. It was simply resting in the water, likely waiting for conditions to change. Wildlife officers regularly deal with situations like this, and neighbors advised calling professionals. Unfortunately, the homeowner believed the reptile could be encouraged to leave with a little persistence. Armed with a long pole, he approached the ditch and attempted to move the animal himself. Witnesses later described the scene as surprisingly calm at first. The alligator barely reacted, which may have created a false sense of confidence. Experts often warn that large reptiles can remain motionless for long periods before reacting with incredible speed. What began as an attempt to solve a neighborhood inconvenience quickly became an emergency. The alligator eventually disappeared back into nearby water. The person trying to relocate it never returned home. Fact 31. A man living in a rural mountain community discovered that a section of his property had become blocked by a fallen boulder after a storm. The rock wasn't threatening his house, nor was it trapping anyone. It simply made access to part of his land inconvenient. Rather than hiring equipment or waiting for assistance, he became determined to move it himself. Using jacks, chains, and improvised tools, he spent hours trying to shift the massive stone. Neighbors later recalled that the project seemed less about necessity and more about proving it could be done. For a while, the effort appeared successful. The boulder moved slightly, encouraging him to continue. What he failed to appreciate was how unstable the situation had become. Large rocks can store tremendous potential energy when balanced in awkward positions. When the stone finally moved, it did so with a force and speed nobody anticipated. A simple obstacle became the center of a tragedy. Fact 32. One of the strangest cases involved a homeowner who noticed a loose television antenna hanging from the roof of his house. During windy days, the metal structure produced an irritating rattling sound that echoed through the neighborhood. The problem wasn't dangerous, at least not yet. Family members encouraged him to schedule repairs, but the constant noise gradually became impossible for him to ignore. Determined to fix it before another storm arrived, he climbed onto the roof carrying basic tools. The antenna looked simple enough. Tighten a few connections and the issue would disappear. Unfortunately, older antennas are often mounted in places that require awkward positioning and careful footing. Witnesses later said everything seemed normal until a sudden gust of wind arrived. In hindsight, the entire situation feels painfully avoidable. The antenna remained attached to the roof. The homeowner's effort to silence an annoying noise ultimately created a far greater tragedy. Fact 33. A fisherman exploring a remote shoreline spotted what appeared to be a valuable cooler floating just offshore after a recent storm. Anyone who spends time around water knows that unusual objects frequently wash up after rough weather. Most are damaged, waterlogged, or completely worthless. Still, curiosity has persuaded countless people to take risks they would otherwise avoid. According to witnesses, the cooler drifted only a short distance from land, appearing close enough to retrieve. Rather than letting it go, the fisherman entered the water and began moving toward it. The object repeatedly drifted farther away, always seeming just within reach. Rescue investigators later described this as a common psychological trap. The goal remains visible, convincing people that one more effort will solve the problem. By the time conditions became dangerous, turning back was no longer easy. The cooler was eventually recovered. Inside was little more than debris. The attempt to claim it cost far more than it could ever have been worth. Which tiny problem would you have chased, and would it have been your last mistake?